Welcome to the Get to Know Memphis First United Methodist podcast. I am your host, Thomas First, and I will be interviewing people from our congregation so that through great stories, laughter, and tales of the experience of the God who is an active agent in our world, we can get to know one another. Welcome to the Get to Know Memphis First United Methodist Church podcast. I am pastor of Memphis First, Tom First, and I am the host of this podcast, and I am grateful that you are joining us yet again. I have actually one of my favorite people from the historically First United Methodist side of the church, Judith Nyabando, on, and when the two churches joined together, Judith was one of the first people to actually call me up and ask me to meet with her on a pastoral level to talk through some things and to just like talk about life stuff. And I was always grateful for that, Judith, because it let me know that I was like welcome in the community. So I'm grateful for you on many levels.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank
Yeah.
you for the introduction.
Yeah, you bet. And I'm excited about this because I think like you have such a unique and interesting story. And
Mhm.
so like, how about this? Let's start with childhood. Did
Mhm.
you grow up going to church? And if so, was there a person that you remember in childhood who sort of created your first memory of God for you?
Sure. Yes, I grew up going to church. My grandparents, I would say, were the most influential in my faith development.
Hmm.
These are my dad's parents. So
Okay.
both of my parents were teachers about maybe 30 miles from where my grandparents live, but we would go to visit them every weekend and then
Uh,
we'll go to church with them. In fact, our local church, it was my grandparents, my grandfather's brother, and another neighbor that started that location. We're part of
uh,
a bigger circuit, but so our local circuit was planted by my grandparents, basically.
wow.
So
Okay.
I remember, in fact, the first time we met. So this was after Zimbabwe got independent, and we had just gone back to our family home for
Mm.
the first time. So they were trying to restart everything. So we were meeting under a tree, basically. That our first service was under a tree behind my grandparents' house. So I
Huh.
have a vivid memory of that. And I remember my grandmother teaching us, they called it catechism back then,
Mm.
just teaching us the fundamentals of the faith, the Apostles' Creed, the Lord's Prayer, and other things about the foundations of Christianity.
Wow.
So basically, I would say it was my grandparents really that had the most influence in my faith journey.
Wow. So they were hosting the church plant in their backyard or
Yeah.
under a tree in their yard.
Yeah, I remember meeting there. Oh, I don't know how long it was before they actually built the first church structure.
Huh.
It probably was maybe a couple of years. I don't
That
remember.
you
And
just
then they
met under the tree.
Yes,
Huh.
yeah, I don't know. I was a young kid, so I can't remember
Sure.
when we moved to the church when they finally built it, the first one. So they moved to another one now. It's now just it's a circuit on its own. We're no longer part of the bigger circuit that was about 10 miles away. So it's a
So
different circuit now.
when you say circuit, this church was a United Methodist church?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
So there's a United Methodist Mission school that has a
Uh,
church about 10 miles away from where my grandparents lived. And so that was the big circuit, I guess, if you will. Most people went, but because, they had to walk there, it's a long distance. So they were allowed to form the local church, which was part of that circuit at my grandparents' house and then
wow.
moved to another location when the village was growing and more people started coming. and then they eventually moved to their current location. They eventually got big enough to be their own circuit and get their own pastor about maybe 20 years ago. So we had to
Okay.
move again. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So just for orienting ourselves in space, where in Zimbabwe, when I go after this interview and I look up Zimbabwe on Google
Mhm.
Maps, what city should I be looking for? Or what town should
Well,
I be looking for?
it won't be a city or a town even. It will be a township, I think.
Okay.
So it's called, the township is called Dombo Rutinira, which is Dombotinhira.
Good.
That's the township. And then you may also maybe look up Nyakatsapa Mission, which
Okay.
is the Nyakatsapa. So that's the
Nagasha. Okay.
yeah.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
So it will be on the eastern part of Zimbabwe,
Okay.
and the closest city will be about maybe 40 miles from south of there, and it's called Mutare. That's the city we used to go to. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So just as a sort of little side comment here, it is really interesting. Like I'm just like imagining little Judith as a little girl worshiping under this tree and learning about God. And that I don't know if you know this, but today's lectionary passage is
Mm.
actually about one of Jesus's parables where he is talking about the parable of the mustard seed, where the little seed grows
Oh,
up into this massive tree, and then all the
yeah.
birds of the air come and they like make their home under this massive tree. And so I just imagine
Oh.
like people making them their home under this tree, learning to worship God. Do you
Mm.
have like an early experience, whether it's under that tree or whatever? Like, do you have like early memories of figuring out who God is, or early memories of sort of like
Mhm.
realizing God loved you, or struggling with God's existence, anything like that? Like what was your faith like as an early child?
I think I always believed that God existed, but I think it took me a while to understand that God was interested in me as a person and I can have
Yeah.
a personal relationship with God. So I think it was when I was in my teens, like 14, 15, when I actually started developing my own relationship with God, trying to understand that for
Huh. What
myself. So it
what
it
was the
took.
spark to that sort of like, was it like a sermon, or was there a person that sort of influenced you in that way?
No, I think it was a lot of things. It was, Sunday school, what we were being taught and getting to a point where you can actually believe it, I guess, that
Yeah.
it's possible for me to have a relationship with God. So it was a cumulative of things, of Sunday school, preaching, and you're
Your
just
grandma's
hearing.
catechism work over the years.
Oh, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Do you have somebody now that you kind of look up to spiritually, that you say, like, this is a person who, like, I want my spiritual life to be like?
That's a good question.
Yeah, thanks.
It's several people really that inspire my faith, I
Hmm.
think. It depends on what it is.
Well,
I,
give
I
me give me
think
one example.
I think well I still think my grandmother still has the most influence i-
Uh,
on my faith. Like the way she practiced her faith was very impactful to me. Like just the day to day.
yeah.
I think she still has the most influence. But well, people like Mother Teresa, I find her being very inspirational in being radical in the way she took care of the poor. I mean, she gave up almost everything and also just built and invited people to come in and help, take care of the orphans and other poor people in Calcutta. I'll say most of the pastors I've heard, actually, including you, have different aspect of the way they practice faith that I glean on.
I
Um,
really like that aspect of being Methodist, that I know that there's a sense in which there's always the risk that, every year we're going to lose our pastor and a new one is going to come in or whatever. But one of the things I like about it is that you don't just get one person's perspective on spirituality across
Yeah.
the span of your life. What you get is some folks, have a spirituality that looks like Andy Rambo's, and some looks like Tom
Mhm.
Firth's, and some looks like Martha Wagley's, and some looks like Judith Grandma. Like it's
Yeah, because each one has different gifts and they operate differently. So there's always something new to learn and a
yeah.
different way of looking at things.
What brought you to the United States?
It was school.
Hmm.
So I got a scholarship from the United Methodist Women to go to Bennett College. It's an HBCU in Greensboro, North Carolina, College for Women.
Okay.
Um,
And
so
did you know
yeah, that
anything about that college before you got the scholarship to go?
no, I didn't know anything. It just came by chance. So Bennett College is a sister school of Africa University, which is in Zimbabwe,
Okay.
and it's also a Methodist university. So through that connection, a couple of Zimbabwean students were introduced to Bennett College.
What a
And
unique combination. United Methodist School that is a historically black college and
mhm,
university tied to what did you say, the Africa University in Zimbabwe?
yeah.
What
hmm
a interesting
Yeah,
combination.
so the United Methodist Church founded the African University in, I want to say, early 90s.
Okay.
So it was fairly a new school. So and they connected with other Methodist universities in the US. So Bennett College was one of the sister schools.
Huh.
Mhm.
That's so fascinating. That's so fascinating. So you got over here on a United Methodist Women's Scholarship.
Yep, pretty much. They covered most of the most of my tuition. Yeah.
Okay. And then how did you end up in Memphis from there?
So I went to graduate school in East Tennessee State, and
Okay.
then after that, I was looking for work and got a job at Southwest Tennessee Community College.
Okay.
In 2008, that's when I moved to Memphis.
Okay. Okay. And then you're not at Southwest anymore.
No, no, no. I'm now at UT Health Science Center. Yeah,
Okay. And what do you do for them?
I'm a data analyst.
Oh, one of the start smart statisticians people.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but yeah, I deal with data. I do data and reporting all day long. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So with that interest is there a story from your life that you look back on, like you can be a child, you can be as an adult, that you think that this story, this adventure, this event sort of encapsulates who Judith is as a person? Like if we were to get insight into you as a personality, is there something you would think about that you would say, I want them to know this?
That's a good a good question. I've never really thought about it. I would say I'm an introvert,
Okay.
but that's besides the point. I think
Helpful to
my
know.
faith, yeah, I would say my faith is very important to me. I'm always seeking to know God more, and over the years, it seems like He keeps revealing Himself
Yeah.
to me, and so that is always of interest to me. I endeavor to be a positive change in the world, although sometimes I feel like I'm not doing much to move the needle, but that
Mm.
it is my desire to make this world a better place and in particular to help the unfortunate.
Well, again, just to refer to the lectionary passage today, I feel like that's kind of what Jesus was saying, right? Like these little acts of faithfulness that are just the size of mustard seeds that don't seem like they're that much and they're not moving the needle
Mm,
much. Like your grandma probably just thought like, I'm just teaching catechism, like it's not that big of a deal,
yeah,
and yet she affected the entirety of your life and has helped make you who you are. What would you
yeah.
say, if I can ask another question, what would you say would be the most surprising difference between African Methodism and then what you've experienced of Methodism in the United States? And maybe you want to
Mm.
go bigger than Methodism. Maybe just Christianity as a whole is fine. Like you don't have to restrict it to Methodism.
Well, I would say the structure of the service seems to be the same for the most part, but well, the music is different, obviously. I mean, we would have a choir or a few people leading, but the congregation does get involved in the music,
Yeah.
in singing, and it's like they're the most involved, more than just the worship leaders, if you will. So it's a very involved process, and people are playing drums and African drums, that is, and well, there's another instrument. I don't know what the English version of it is, and people are typically dancing, and so I would say that's the main difference, the music.
Yeah.
And well, I mean, actually, the service itself can be about 2 hours or 2.5 hours
Wow.
because t people take time, do introductions every Sunday. The sermon sometimes will run 40 minutes, an hour, and
I
sometimes
feel
they'll
like if I get over
incorporate.
25 minutes, somebody's going to throw something at me.
Yeah, I mean, it's the 20-minute sermon is probably okay, or less than 30, so that you can retain the information. I don't know. But
Yeah.
sometimes they'll combine Sunday school with the service, like they'll start with Sunday school and then move on to the main service. So,
That's
but then,
interesting.
and they will also have classes, and then they have section meetings. So if the churches tend to be bigger, I guess so. They do divide people into sections and
Mm,
they meet as a section typically on Wednesday nights, just to do a Bible study and pray together.
gotcha.
So it's a lot of, I guess it's a lot of more of our community events that are
Yeah.
happening. That's one thing I would say is different.
That's been my experience whenever I have worshiped with folks in other parts of the world when I have gone, is the worship services often tend to be more lively. They're
Mm,
not really about who's performing on stage so much as the congregation is involved in very unique and particular ways, and there's dancing and drums. And it strikes me like what seems normal to like a lot of like American Christians is actually pretty abnormal for the whole of like what Christian worship looks like. And
mhm,
I think in some ways I think the history of this is really that we're in America, we're sort of shaped by like European intellectualism that for like
mhm.
a few hundred years just tried to smash down any emotion. And that
Yeah.
came out in our worship services where our worship services became quiet
Mm.
and it became performative and intellectual in nature rather than involved and passionate. So when you came to Memphis, did you look at other Methodist churches or did you just sort of, let's say, I'm going to this one on Second Street and that's where I'm staying?
I did. I think I attended one Methodist because I've always lived in Midtown or
Okay.
downtown. So I was looking for something close. So my first boss at Southwest was a Methodist. I can't remember how we got to it. And he's the one who said, "Oh, you should check out First United Methodist down the street." At the time, we were meeting at St. Jude. That was after the church had burned. So they were meeting at St. Jude. That's when I started going there. And it just felt like it was a better fit for me.
Yeah. Well, and
So,
also being an introvert, being smaller is probably helpful.
yes.
Well, maybe, I don't
Yeah.
know, maybe introverts can disappear a little more in the big crowd in the big churches too. But
And every,
I'm glad that you did settle on our church. What was it about the church that has made you stay all these years? Because it's
I
really
think,
changed a lot.
yeah, it has changed. It has changed. I think it's mostly the people and the ministries that take place at First United Methodist Church. That's the main thing I would say is the people seem to be welcoming to everyone, open to accepting different people, and the ministries to the unhoused, those
Yeah.
I mean, I don't get as involved now like I would like to, but that's one of the reasons why I stay.
Yeah, it is one of the things I would say, our church isn't as there's not like a lot of flash and bang to it in terms of, it's not bright and shiny, but like what we do on that street corner matters. What we do in the city matters. I've
Mm-hmm.
always said like I wanted to be a pastor of a church where if that church disappeared, the city would feel it. And I
Mm,
feel like if Memphis First disappeared, like the city of Memphis would feel it. The most
yeah.
vulnerable people in our city would feel it. So one last question, just honor your time here. When you think about God, what kind of images come to mind? I was listening to someone on a podcast the other day saying that it's really important for us to think about God with multiple metaphors and multiple images because those images help us expand our understanding of who God is. And so one of the things that's been really interesting to me is asking this question to people like when you think about God, what kind of metaphor or images come up and why?
I think compassionate
Mm,
is the one that comes to mind. Loving, although I'm realizing that I haven't even scratched the surface in terms of understanding God's love for us. I was reading, is that in Ephesians? That the one that talks about, well, Paul is praying over the church and saying that I want you to understand how wide, how deep, how it's like the boundless love of God. It's like that's mind blowing. How do you understand that? I mean, how do you even begin to understand that kind of love? So that's one that I'm learning to embrace, that
yeah.
the love of God and the goodness of God. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's challenging in this world to see God working,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's good to be reminded when you go back into the scriptures of the character
Yeah.
of God always, and try not to worry about everything that's not working in the world, knowing that, God is loving and He's
Yeah.
good and
Yeah.
He will take care of us.
I like how you said that about just like learning to scratch the surface of love because I feel like that's really the nature of being a Christian is the further I dig into the love of God and I allow myself to sort of submit to it, the more I realize I'm still just scratching the surface of it. And it's, like you were quoting Paul there, right? Like this is this love that's just breaking boundaries and it can't be contained by my conceptions of it.
Now, I would say, especially when I was younger, I struggled with, or I did mention it before, I struggled with understanding that God was interested in me as a person,
Yeah.
or He's interested in my concerns, in my day to day, in my joys, in whatever I'm doing. So
Yeah.
it took many years to peel that and to get to an understanding that yeah, he already knows what I'm thinking, he already knows what I'm doing, so why not?
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
does say we should bring everything to him in prayer. So that has taken a long time for me to get to that part that, yes, he's a big God. There are billions of people on the earth, but he's still interested also in me as a person.
Yeah. God already knows everything, but like wants to hear what you have to say and what you're
Yeah.
interested in, what you want. It's interesting
Yeah,
how
your
like,
sermon yesterday was very good in touching on that.
oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you. Well, I feel like it's a thing I have wrestled with as well, like believing God already knows what I want. It's like, well, I don't really articulate it a lot, but I had this moment, my own sort of scratching the surface moment. Like sometime around last summer, I was out walking and I was just like, you know what? Like God already knows, but like, why don't I just say it? And so I just had this conversation with God about these things that like, I was like, God, you already know this, but I would assume you want to hear me say it because you
Yeah.
are interested in what I have to say.
Yeah.
So, Judith, I am so grateful for your time. Thank you for doing this interview with me and joining the Get to Know Memphis First podcast. And thank you so much for just being such a wonderful part of our church.
Well, thank you for having me. It was good to talk about this. I hope I've said something useful.
Oh, I guarantee that you have. So, all right. Bye, Judith.
Bye bye.